Alright, this is a video all about nouns in Latin. It's a brief overview of the characteristics of Latin nouns. We're going to look at some vocabulary, but we're not going to go too in-depth with any of it here. So all nouns in Latin have four big characteristics. Those are: every noun has a declension, every noun has a gender, every noun has a number, and every noun has a case. So we're going to go through each of the four of those in detail. The first one that we're going to look at is declension. And what a declension is it's a family of nouns. These nouns all act the same way. It's a convenient way for us to group nouns looking at their behavior. We have 5 declensions in Latin. We've got the first, the second, the third, the fourth, and the fifth. And nouns in each one of these groups react to various circumstances in the same way. So it's helpful to know what declension a noun is in, to know how it's going to act when we turn it plural, when we make it a direct object or an indirect object, which we'll talk about later when we change its case, that is. So it's important to know what declension it is, but declension is just kind of an artificial way of us grouping nouns. It's kind of like in the natural world, there are trees, maybe they're blue like this one, and there are some deciduous trees, and there are conifers. They're all trees. It's just us humans who group them that way. These are all nouns, and this is just our way of grouping them to kind of understand them better. Now, I would stress that every noun only has one declension. A noun can belong to the first declension, or it can belong to the second, or the third, fourth, or fifth. Never does a noun belong to 2 declensions at once. And that's the same with gender that we're going to go on to next. Gender is the next item. Declension, gender, number, and case. Gender is similar to declension in that it's a way of grouping nouns. It's kind of an artificial convention. We have 3 genders in Latin: masculine, feminine, and neuter. We do not have genders in English, really. We don't have declensions either. Gender is different than declension in that it affects other things besides nouns. So it affects adjectives that are agreeing with that noun, and it affects that shouldn't say adverbs, that should say pronouns. So it affects adjectives and pronouns as well, whereas adjectives and pronouns don't really reflect the differences in declension. Or at least they don't change based on a noun's declension, like adjectives and pronouns would based on a noun's gender. So we went through declension, gender, now we're on number. Number is probably the simplest of them all. You have 2 numbers, singular and plural. You're probably quite familiar with this concept in English. Plural has an S on the end most of the time, sometimes an ES. Sometimes you change the word entirely, like goose and geese. Anyway, singular is just one of that noun. It's 1 piece of toast. Plural is 2 pieces of toast, 3 pieces of toast, 17 pieces of toast. So plural is 2 or more. So unless you have someone telling you the number, if you just say pieces of toast, you don't know how many I've got. So declension, gender, number, and case. So declension and gender are similar in that a noun has one declension, first, second, third, fourth, or fifth, and it has one gender. It's either masculine or feminine or neuter. It can't be masculine and feminine, although sometimes, well, there's an exception there. But for the most part, nouns just belong to one of those. With number, a noun can change. It can be singular in one instance and it can be plural in another. That's just like in English. It's the same with case. Case of a noun changes often based on its function in a sentence, which is what the case is. Case indicates what a noun is doing in a sentence. There are 5 of these cases, or at least 5 major cases, and there are 2 smaller ones that we're not going to discuss here. But we're going to go through each of the 5 major cases in quick order. The first of those is the nominative. The nominative case, you might recognize nomen, the word for name. The nominative case is used for naming the subject of a sentence. So the subject is the actor in a sentence. So the boy threw the ball. In that sentence, who's doing the action? The boy. So the boy is considered our nominative, or the boy would be in the nominative case in that instance. He's the subject. So the next case after nominative is genitive. And genitive is used for belonging or possession. We think of that as kind of our apostrophe S in English. So to see an example in a sentence, we might have the boy threw the dog's apostrophe S ball. So in that instance, the dog is in the genitive. You can also think of it as the boy threw, getting rid of that there, threw the ball of the dog, or the ball belonging to the dog. In any of those instances, it's the dog who owns, who possesses the ball. So the dog would be considered in the genitive case there. Next is the dative case. So the dative is a little bit difficult. It is the indirect recipient of the action of the sentence. We call this more commonly the indirect object, or the IO. And it's to whom or for whom something is done in a sentence. So if we think of the sentence, that same one, the boy threw the ball. So can you answer for whom that's done? For whom the boy is throwing the ball? No, you really can't unless you have your indirect object in there, for the dog, or perhaps to the dog. And in that instance, either one of these could be considered our indirect object. So that's in direct contrast with the accusative, which indicates the direct recipient of an action, or what we call the direct object, or the DO. This is kind of the doee of a sentence. If the subject is the doer or the actor, the direct object, the accusative, is the doee or the actee. So with our example here, the boy threw the ball. The direct recipient of the throwing is the ball. It's the ball that's being thrown. The ball is our direct object there. The ball would be in the accusative case. And then finally, we come to the ablative. The ablative case, after the nominative, the genitive, the dative, the accusative, we arrive at the ablative. It's kind of a catch-all case. It does a lot of different things. Some of the main ones, it tells us where or when, how an action is done, and it goes with some prepositions, which kind of goes along with where or when. It tells us, did something happen before or after? Did something happen with or without? Those sorts of things. The accusative is also used with some prepositions. So you should watch the video reviewing prepositions for that more detailed information. But the ablative does a lot of different things. This is just kind of an overview of some of the more basic aspects of it. So then finally, just to review, nouns in Latin, each noun belongs to one declension. It could be the first, it could be the second, third, fourth, or fifth. Each noun has a gender, masculine, feminine, or neuter. Nouns can have number. They can either be singular or plural. So we'll denote that with an S or a PL. And whereas nouns can only have one declension and only one gender, nouns are generally flexible. You can change them from singular to plural, just like in English. And nouns have case. And case can be nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, or ablative. And any noun, for the most part, can be any case there. So that concludes the brief overview of the characteristics of nouns in Latin. If you have any questions about any of these aspects, you can watch more specific videos about those, or I could recommend that you speak with me in class. In the meantime, have a wonderful afternoon or evening.